Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, June 25th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about Mike Pence and the party Republicans that are seemingly pushing themselves away further and further from former President Donald Trump, something that I found to be quite interesting. Even though Mike Pence served with President Trump for 4 years, and the Republican Party has been very quick to praise President Trump on almost every single level. Now, looking at the statements that were made by Mike Pence, he said them in a statement, in a speech actually last night, where he says he was proud to uphold the duties of the Constitution, saying that he is proud that they did their part on the tragic day to reconvene Congress and fulfill the duty under the Constitution and the laws of the United States. And then he goes to say that he didn't have any type of power to change the election results, and says that the truth is there is almost no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president. And I see that as both an indication that Mike Pence recognizes that the Constitution never gave him the ability to do this, and we sort of knew that. I told you guys multiple times, even though some people were worried, that Mike Pence might be able to change the election results. The thing is, he never had that power. Never in United States history has a vice president overturned the election results, even if they believed that they were cheated out of the election or forcibly removed. I mean, you were looking at President Trump in a position where he was claiming the election was rigged, went to the courts, went to the state delegations, and then went to Mike Pence, and everybody turned him away because none of them had the power to change this. Not a single person could have overturned the election results, not even the President of the United States. And that's why American democracy works so well. That's why even when you are on the losing side, nobody can try to cheat the election in order to overturn it after everything has been counted. And in this situation, I think Mike Pence is really trying to acknowledge that they certified the election results, and he's not ashamed of what he did. But I also see that second part of the statement that maybe it's a swipe towards President Trump, saying that there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president. Yes, in many ways he's referring to himself, but I could also see it applied towards President Trump, someone who did single-handedly try to overturn the election results. Of course, he had plenty of supporters that were with him through it, but he was the main one leading this effort. He was the main one going to media, going to Twitter, inciting, in many ways, portions of the insurrection at least, that make it seem as if President Trump was the mastermind behind everything. And that's how the American public looks at it, and that's how it is viewed from an outsider's perspective. And if you look at the way that Donald Trump took a hit after the insurrection, we are not the only ones who view that in such a way. There is a reason why his approval rating or favorability rating went, from just being down 11 points to being down 20 points in the matter of a day or two. The reason for that was the insurrection. The reason for that was the countless media reports that President Trump was the one who incited the insurrection. When you look at the reason why the media and the social media websites have banned President Trump, it was a direct response to the public's reception of President Trump. It was a direct response of the media perception of the insurrection in relation towards Donald Trump. So Mike Pence and the Republican Party seem to be at a crossroads where they don't want to be a part of that image. And this is the first time we've seen Mike Pence go so far away from President Trump since he endorsed Ted Cruz in the Republican primary in 2016. I remember this. Mike Pence's endorsement was, halfway put. He barely endorsed Ted Cruz, just said plainly, I'm voting for Ted Cruz, but didn't exactly oppose anybody else. When you were looking at the endorsement to, and a number of the statements made by the governor at the time, he was the governor of Indiana before he was the vice president, he actually was very quick to before President Trump, or at the time, just Donald Trump. It was quite interesting, though, because I wasn't too old when I was looking at this endorsement, but I do remember that I was surprised President Trump chose Mike Pence because Mike Pence did endorse Ted Cruz, and Indiana was supposed to be this state where Donald Trump was not supposed to win a delegate, and then all of a sudden, Donald Trump is able to do very well in Indiana. But this was supposed to be Ted Cruz's state to lose. And, looking at Mike Pence's endorsement, this was the last time Mike Pence went out and actively supported something that President Trump did not, before he supported the election results. And this was something that was sort of forced onto Mike Pence as well. I would not necessarily assume that in a situation in which Mike Pence had the ability to overturn the election results for President Trump, that he would not have done it. I have seen no indication that in that position, Mike Pence would have chosen the situation, chosen what he had, at least being forced by the Constitution. He never had the ability to overturn the election results, and consequently, he never tried. But had he been in that position where he could have, I really question whether or not he could, whether or not he would have. But looking at the distancing, I think this also comes out a result of some of these new numbers that we've seen. I covered this poll yesterday when I talked about Kamala Harris, the vice president, defeating President Trump and Mike Pence. But there also were questions amongst Republicans asking them, would you primarily lean yourself towards Republicans in the party or President Trump? And what you'll notice is that leading up to the election, President Trump always was above the Republican Party, always was above the party Republicans. And then it started to become even. It started to go time after time after time. The January was a big deficit, largely because of the insurrection. But now we're back to a large deficit here. It was, neck and neck in December, February, March, April, May, and then June rolls around, and the party Republicans are above the Trump Republicans by what? You're talking about a difference here of 15 points. Rather than be up 1 or down 3 or up 2, up 10 at the peak. After being down by 19 points in October of 2020, all of a sudden, Echelon Insights reports that party Republicans have taken a lead over the Trump Republicans. And I find this to be quite interesting. And if you look at the 2024 support for President Trump, yes, he gets 60%, but before, maybe you would have seen polls putting him higher. And if 35% are saying they'd vote for another candidate with just 6% unsure, that also is a little bit of a red flag for President Trump, because the number typically isn't 35%. It's somewhere between 10, 20%, and then the rest are undecided. So to see such a large amount of support towards party Republicans shift, I think this is largely as an effort from the party to move away, at least in part, from President Trump. We've sort of seen signalings from it. In addition to Mike Pence, in addition to a couple of other Republicans sort of run against or continue their campaigns against Trump-endorsed candidates. For the perfect example, I guess North Carolina, you have Pat McCrory and you have Mark Walker, two of which who have been supporters of President Trump aren't backing down simply because President Trump endorsed Ted Budd. Had they been fully blown Trump supporters, they probably would have backed down, knowing that the president of the United States, the former one, had put his input on the Republican primary. But it's that combined with Pence, combined with Lindsey Graham indicating that 2022 will be that first test for President Trump's grip on the GOP. I think they're starting to warm up to the idea of removing themselves away. And I think Mike Pence truly wants to save himself above anything else. When you take a look at the 2024 data, Mike Pence seems to be a top Republican name. While he hasn't publicly expressed interest in running, he certainly is a potential candidate. He hasn't completely eliminated it as a possibility, largely because I think that's what he wants for his political future. When you take a look at nationwide polling data, what you'll notice is that the other group and Donald Trump seem to be the only ones up. But Mike Pence is routinely coming in second or third place, currently speaking in third place, but for the longest period of time, even with Trump on the ballot, he was receiving second place. And when you look at the polls without Trump, what you'll notice is that Pence is still in second place. He's below DeSantis, but the fact that he's above Haley, Trump Jr., Rubio, Romney is something to note, because Trump really seemed to be against Mike Pence, said that Mike Pence didn't have the guts to do what needed to be done pertaining to the 2020 election. So Mike Pence probably doesn't have that overwhelming support from the Trump voter, but the fact he's getting some recognizable support from the GOP might be something telling him you could have a shot at the Republican nomination. Because if we do a little bit of a flashback, let's go back to 2016. I want you to understand what happened in 2016. Because it actually wasn't too bad for the other Republicans. When you take a look at the polling data, which I will show you in just a moment, I want you to understand exactly what happened amongst this race. What you'll notice is that when you look at the polling data, I guess it's not going to show it to me, unfortunately. I wish that it would, but it's not going to show me the polling data. Maybe we'll find it. Let's see. Here we go. Great thing about Wikipedia, you'll always find what you need to. But if we take a look at the opinion polling data from the beginning of time, what you might notice is that Donald Trump never really has the majority of support. While he does have the plurality, getting a lot of the support, the most you'll see is 42. 42 again, 45 at one point. By the time we reach the final election, keep in mind, everybody had dropped out by this point. By the time we reached the final election, let me show you the results. You'll notice that Donald Trump never got the majority of the vote. Donald Trump only received 44.9% of the vote. So if Mike Pence is in a position where he can try to replicate Trump's victories because of a large primary in 2024. And I'm telling you now, there will be a large primary field if President Trump decides not to run. That Mike Pence might have a realistic shot at the nomination. And I think he understands that. When you're looking at some of these states, for example, let's go to South Carolina. Because of the Republican Party, they have many states that are winner-take-most, or in some narrower cases, I would say, a narrower amount of cases, they have winner-take-all systems. What this means, essentially, in a winner-take-all system, I think it's easy to understand, if you win the state, you win all of the delegates. But in winner-take-most systems, if you win, you're getting at least 50% of the delegates, even if you win by a plurality. South Carolina was one of the first states that skyrocketed Donald Trump's chances at winning the nomination. He was able to win in this state with less than 1/3 of the vote, but won 100% of the delegates. Had Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio teamed up, they would have defeated Trump if they just allocated their support to one candidate. The thing about the 2016 primaries was that Donald Trump realistically was a beatable candidate. They could have eliminated him had they backed a single person. That is not the case in 2024. And this might be a strategy that Mike Pence might utilize. There will be plenty of Trump Republicans that run if Trump doesn't run himself. But if Mike Pence comes out there as the only alternative, as the more party Republican on the ticket or on the ballot, he might get a significant portion of the vote, maybe not a majority, barely a plurality probably, but in some of these states, that would be enough to win him 100% of the delegates or a winner-take-most system. So even if Mike Pence is routinely getting 30% of the vote, he could win the nomination with just 30% of the vote. That's the way that the Republican primary process works. As long as there are other candidates in that are going to continue to peel away the vote and split the Trump Republican vote, Pence will be fine. So that's largely why I see him making these statements. That's also why I see the party Republicans start to peel away from President Trump, because maybe they want a different type of nominee for 2024. When I'm looking at the favorability rating between Donald Trump and Mike Pence, it's night and day. While Mike Pence may be disapproved of, it's not by nearly the same amount as President Trump. Donald Trump seems to be so unapproved that it's holding strong, even after his presidency. Once you leave office, the American public reception of you seems to change. The American public, perception of you, looking at the way that it happened for Obama in his lame duck session. He ended office with a 56% approval rating. For the majority of him being in his office, Barack Obama was close to being disapproved of. I rarely ever called him Barack Obama. That felt very weird to say. But looking at President Trump here in the negative, consistently after leaving office, there is something about him that stuck with the American people. Whether that was the pandemic, whether that was the insurrection, maybe it was just a culmination of the 4 years or the 6 years of his total media outspokenness. Whatever it is, he seems to be unpopular, whereas Mike Pence, while unpopular, isn't disapproved of to the same degree. And this is why President Trump might be receiving a number of people breaking away from him and his Make America Great Again image. I think that the party Republicans want to at least reserve one person, in this case I think it might be Mike Pence or maybe somebody else, to offer an alternative to the Make America Great Again spiel in 2024. And Pence seems to be in a position where, while he isn't going to be any less of a Republican, because in this same statement, he said that it was state-sanctioned racism to teach the critical race theory or to integrate it into American public schools. But besides that, while he's still very much a Republican, he isn't a Trump Republican, at least anymore. I think that while Mike Pence was in many ways complacent for much of the Trump presidency, someone who has been an accomplice to President Trump's claims, to a lot of what President Trump did. The final breaking point for Mike Pence was the 2020 election results. It was the fact that President Trump refused to accept that he lost Wisconsin, that he lost Michigan, that he lost Pennsylvania, that he lost Georgia, that he lost Arizona. These 5 states that were crucial in Biden's victory, that President Trump never once acknowledged that he fairly lost, never once conceded the presidential election as we know a concession should be. Saying, oh, I lost due to fraud is not a real concession, but by definition it technically is because you're acknowledging that you lost. But in what Mike Pence did on January 5th, January 6th, what he did to ensure that the election result, January 6th, January 7th, to ensure that the election results were certified, that the 2020 election would not go up in flames. He just followed his constitutional duty. And I think that's what he wants to really ingrain in the eyes of many American voters, that he is not a Trump Republican anymore, or at least isn't a fully blown one. He may praise President Trump in the future. He may say, part of the work that I did under the wonderful White House, or whatever he might do, because certainly he's not going to be able to win an election without Trump voters. But he probably won't be as pro-Trump as he used to. Like I said, this is the first and most outspoken I've seen Mike Pence against Donald Trump since he endorsed Ted Cruz. So it is quite interesting to see that maybe this is the start of a couple of party officials, maybe many more, that are starting to break away from President Trump's mold because they know that it might not be the winnable strategy for them in the future. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post 2020 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.